Well, hey guys, we're starting the day off in Carter Cemetery, just out from Mickey, Tennessee. What is a channel devoted to the state of Mississippi doing in Tennessee? Well, as some of you know, I've had an obsession of late with the state line mob and the happenings and the lives of the people in and around the state line clubs, the state line that is between Mississippi and Tennessee, just north of Corinth on Old Highway 45. And let me not forget to ask you that if you think you like this kind of content, why don't you hit that like button? I'm sort of freewheeling it today, just saying what I remember from the things I've read. So if I make a mistake or say something that's incorrect, please say so in the comments. You know, the more I read in books or investigate online or look around here in the state line area, I always find 2 or 3 versions of every story. But we're here in Mickey today to see the grave of a guy named Will Hathcock. See, I think without Mr. Hathcock and his family, there is no state line, or certainly there is no state line like the one we know about today. And if you don't have the state line like what we talk about today, then you certainly don't have the movie Walking Tall, and you don't have the legend or the folk hero that Buford Pusser became. But obviously, folks, all that is just my opinion, and YouTube is full of folks like me spewing forth our opinions. In the middle of this beautiful little cemetery, you'll find the grave of Will Hathcock. Will's marker is the white marker you see before you. It was the 1930s, and well, Will did many things to make ends meet for his family, and one of those things is said to have been run moonshine for a guy named Nelson Timlake in Corinth. Perhaps it was during this time that Mr. Timlake met Will's son, Jack. Outside of working very hard just to provide food for his family to eat, Will apparently had another problem. When he got drunk, he became mean and angry. And many times he took out his frustrations and anger on his wife. At times he beat her rather severely. One Saturday in May of 1934 was one of those times. Will's oldest twin sons, Charlie Edo and Isidore or Isdo, were old enough to be angry back at their father and, well, do something about it. Will had been knocking his wife Janie around a little bit when the twins confronted their father. According to one account I read, Will threatened his son Isdo, and Edo held Will back. Somewhere in the melee, Isdo pistol-whipped his father into unconsciousness. Young Jack Hathcock, who was around 14 at the time, drove his mother to their grandfather's store in Corinth to help keep her safe. Isdo made his way to Corinth for safety as well, and Edo stayed behind to take care of his father. At some point, Will woke up and took off for Corinth in Edo's car. I'll read you a little short article of the altercation that happened next that I found in a local paper. The article's titled, "Father and Son Die in a Gunfire Battle." A father and son were dead, victims of what Sheriff J.B. Coleman described as an exchange of gunfire late Sunday. The father, Will Hathcock, a 65-year-old farmer of Mickey, Tennessee, died almost instantly. The son, Isidore Hathcock, 30, succumbed in a hospital here Monday morning. Sheriff Coleman said the shooting occurred near his home. He said, "I was told the shooting was the result of trouble the two had a few days ago." Regardless of how all that really went down, young Jack Hathcock not only lost his father and an older brother on Mother's Day in 1934, he left the Mickey area and moved toward Corinth, where Mr. Nelson Timlake took him in and began to treat him like a son and mentor him in the ways of business. Well, now we're moving on to Henry's Cemetery in Corinth, and interestingly enough, it's a couple miles down the highway from where the state line clubs were located. You know, Corinth is to the south of the cemetery, and the state line is just a little bit to the north. You know, that was one of the things the movie Walking Tall sort of got wrong. It seemed to imply that most of the state line activity happened in McNairy County, Tennessee. But honestly, most of these folks seem to live in and around Corinth. I'm sure a good portion of state liners lived in McNairy County as well. But a movie is just that. It's Hollywood, and surely people realize that. Anyway, we're here in Henry Cemetery to visit a few more Hathcock graves. You know, there are so many questions I would like to ask these guys. You know, how and when and what they did at different times, and, well, even why they may have done it. The state line was an interesting area of, well, business enterprise, we'll call it, that I think was simply born out of the era of Prohibition. You know, they seem to have had a little gambling, no big casinos or anything. There was some prostitution. They did always sell whiskey and beer. I think the whiskey was mostly bonded whiskey, and probably a little white lightning too. But the state line area did offer a pretty big group of people a way to make a whole lot of money at a time when that just wasn't possible anywhere else in the area. But yes, their activities did include illegal and almost illegal activities. But if you want to know specifically what those were, then you can search the internet for guys like, well, there's a Mike Elam and Buford Pusser, The Other Story, a site he runs on Facebook and YouTube. Then you can look for the Buford Pusser Museum site for the Buford Pusser side of the state line story, and you can read some of the books that are out there and available. But let's get back to the Hathcocks. Clyde Raymond Hathcock, better known as Jack Hathcock, was the youngest of the Hathcock brothers. Will and Janie Hathcock started having children with a William Odell in 1905, and they had their 10th child, a girl named Mary, in 1925. Jack was their 8th child, and of course he was born in 1920. You've just heard the story of his Mother's Day in 1934, where his father and older brother were killed. After that event, Jack moved to Corinth and started working in and around the State Line Club, and he ran errands and did other things for Mr. Timlake in and around his other businesses as well. Jack met Louise Anderson Hathcock when she came to work at the State Line Club. They were married on October the 2nd, 1937. And we gave their story a pretty good rundown in the video we did on Louise. So to help keep this video short, we're going to ask you to go there for all that. I just need you to know that Jack worked in and around the state line for 30-some-odd years. And for 15 or 20 of those years, he basically ran it. At least until May 22nd, 1964, when Louise Hathcock either shot Jack herself or had him shot. Mind you, Louise had shot Jack on 3 different occasions previously. Let's move on to William Odell Hathcock, Sr., that is. Now remember, he was the oldest brother, and he was also around on that day in 1934. He worked in and around the state line, but seemed to keep a rather low profile. He seemed to help his brother Jack out when he needed some help, but generally his name didn't come up that much in all my reading. He seemed to do just what he had to do and, well, tried his best to keep his son, W.O. Hathcock Jr., in line. The senior went by the name Odell, and Jr. was known by the name W.O. W.O. was buried not too very far from his dad here. Now, W.O. Hathcock was a young man, somewhere in his mid-20s, when he opened the Plantation Club. Of course, it was on the Mississippi side of the state line. W.O. Hathcock seems to be the one Hathcock that Sheriff Buford Pusser disliked the most. Boy, there sure are a lot of questions I would like to ask W.O. Odell Hathcock, and especially his son W.O., were really the only Hathcock men that lived a long life. Nonetheless, I hope you've enjoyed seeing that there were real people involved in and around the state line, and I want to encourage you to do a little bit of your own research to try to get at what really happened. But be ready for 2 or 3 versions of every story because they're out there. Thank you.